Hello YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily focus on Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. And if you want to help me out, I have a Patreon and Discord, more info at the end of the video. Alright, so previously I made a video about some of my favorite archetypes for Pathfinder 2. Well, since then, the remaster has come out along with a lot of new archetypes. Now here's the thing, I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the archetypes. So I reached out to all of you viewers on my YouTube community page and asked you what you thought were some good archetypes, and you guys delivered, so let's go through a few of them right now. But before we get started, I want to say that I'm not ranking these in any sort of order. The numbers I'll use are just to reference them, so I'm not saying number 1 is better than number 5, for example. Also, I want to use this video to highlight some of the lesser used archetypes, so ones I've mentioned before like Beastmaster or Medic aren't on the list. Now, as a quick reminder, just so we're all on the same page, archetypes work kinda weirdly. Effectively, an archetype is a second, half class that is tacked onto your character. You can sacrifice some of your class abilities to get abilities related to something else. So like if your witch wants to wear armor, you can sacrifice some witchy stuff to get the sentinel archetype, which gives you proficiency in armor, that sort of thing. There's a lot of archetypes out there covering just about anything any character concept could want, so, go explore them. Now the first feat you have to take for any archetype is called the dedication feat, which gives you something, sure, but it also unlocks the ability to take other archetype feats. From then on, you can, if you want, sacrifice more class abilities in the form of class feats to get more archetype abilities. If you want a more in-depth discussion, my first archetype video talks about it, go check it out. Now before we get to the list proper, I have a few honorable mentions because I can never make a list without honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1 is from me, and it is Gorilla. That's the commando, not the ape. Gorilla has several feats that boost their ability to use slings and blowguns, which kinda makes those weapons, well, I'm not gonna say good, but better? It lets you reload those weapons quicker and adds poison damage to your strikes, that kind of thing. And hey, with Death Blow, in rare instances, you can just outright unalive some guy. Save or not be living effects are pretty rare in Pathfinder, so that's cool to see. Second honorable mention was put forth by a lot of people, the Bullet Dancer. This is a fun archetype and lets you live out the gun-fu fantasy, but it's basically restricted to monks unless you take it at a higher level. It's fun, don't get me wrong, I just wouldn't say it's widely applicable. Third honorable mention goes to Wrestler. Lots of people mention this one. Listen, I know Wrestler is good, the wider Pathfinder community knows it's good. It makes you better at grappling, which is a way for even wizards and other spellcasters to excel in combat. It's all great. I just don't think we need to go through it. I'm here to shine a light on some of the lesser known archetypes, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about old favorites. Final honorable mention goes to the Unexpected Sharpshooter. A couple of people mentioned this one as well. The flavor of this archetype is super funny, as you are basically the embodiment of the trope accidental aiming skills. This archetype gives you a couple of powerful gun abilities, but the first few only function once a day. A lot of it is luck-based stuff, which is funny. The downside here is that a lot of these effects are fortune effects, which means, rules as written, they cannot be used with hero points for rerolls. But moving on to the actual top 5. Spirit Warrior was a surprise sleeper on this list. As mentioned by Christopher G2347, the idea behind the archetype is that you are a real wuxia-inspired fighter. Think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type shenanigans. Good with a one-handed finesse weapon and unarmed strikes. The dedication feat for this archetype is crazy good. First of all, it basically gives you a monk's powerful fist ability. Plus, it gives your unarmed strikes the parry trait. But the big thing is that it also gives someone a similar ability to a monk's flurry of blows. It lets you attack twice for one action once a turn. The only caveat is that one strike has to be unarmed, and one strike has to be from a one-handed weapon or a finesse or agile weapon. So yeah, your swashbuckler could strike with an Aldori dueling sword and kick as one action. Flurry of blows is one of the best things in the game from an action economy standpoint. Heck, the monk archetype doesn't give you flurry of blows until level 10, and even then, the archetype version restricts it to once every few rounds, so being able to do it at level 2 with a fighter is crazy good. Plus, there are some real good feats in here. For example, you can bypass most damage resistances with Sword Lightwave, really solid archetype that you can really build around. The only real downside here is that to make full use of this build, you'd need a magical weapon and hand wraps of mighty blows, and that could get expensive. There are a couple of ways around this. The Resurgent Maelstrom Magus can make weapon attacks using the bonus from their hand wraps of mighty blows, and this build works quite well if you're in a campaign with automatic bonus progression. Finally, the Spirit Warrior archetype itself can help with this with the feat Cutting Heaven, Crushing Earth, as that lets you use your hand wrap runes for your weapon, but it does come online at level 6, which could be late for some people. All in all, Spirit Warrior is a great archetype for people that find themselves action-starved, like a Thaumaturge. It may not work for every build, like it doesn't work for a Barbarian two-handing a Great Axe, but it is still solid. For number 4, Sigourney Cleaver suggested the multi-class archetype for Commander. Solid choice. This base dedication gives you 2 tactics, and you can choose one at the start of the day to use. Further archetype feats can give you more Commander feats, more tactics, or even access to expert tactics at level 8. This could be great for certain campaigns, like giving everyone a swim speed in a pirate campaign. I still think Passage of Lines would be great for tight dungeon corridors if some monsters move next to your wizard. And of course, if you have multiple gun or crossbow users in the party, reload can greatly increase your efficiency. The downside of this archetype is that it doesn't give you much beyond the initial dedication. Taking multiple archetype feats, I think you still only max out at 3 tactics a day, and most of the other feats are not that great. I would have preferred if there was some feat that did a little more, like maybe a level 10 feat that gave the person with the archetype the ability to grant an additional reaction like the base commander gets. Final thoughts, this is a great option for a spellcaster like a wizard or a witch that wants something to do with their third action after casting a spell. Not all parties or campaigns will benefit from this archetype, but it is certainly an option depending on your party composition. Next up at number 3 we have Archaeologist, as suggested by Timothy Edwards. Now I feel like Archaeologist is another one that's not thought of very much because it doesn't increase combat potential. However, it's a great way to turn almost any character into a skill monkey, and it can help you find and disarm traps if no one played the rogue in your campaign. Here's the thing, the archetype is the king of out-of-combat stuff. First of all, it requires you to be trained in society and thievery because the dedication feat makes you expert in those 2 skills. Skill increases are hard to come by for most Pathfinder classes, so 2 skill increases is really good. Aside from that, the archetype can help with trap-filled dungeons. This is because it can net you the Trap Finder feat for finding and disarming traps. Or you could get additional lore and a language to know about the dungeon that you're in. Even the ability to re-roll failed checks once an hour instead of once a day. Now again, the big downside here is that it's not much for combat. A lot of abilities let you recall knowledge better, but that's not great if you're looking for a pure combat boost. But yeah, Archaeologist is solid. Like many of these archetypes, it's not for every campaign, but in campaigns where you stick to one general area, such as Abomination Vaults, Season of Ghosts, or Shades of Blood, it could be a great boost to parties that struggle with out-of-combat versatility. Next up at number 2 we have, I can't pronounce that username, but they suggested Sniping Duo. The idea behind this archetype is that you are a ranged weapon striker, like with a bow or crossbow, and you have a friend helping you with range finding and spotting and the like. Now, to be honest, I never really looked at this archetype because I was under the delusion that it required you and a friend, and getting 2 players to do that level of coordination is tough. But no, this one is actually really cool. When you take this archetype, you designate one of your allies, called a spotter, and they gain all the bonuses without having to take a thing. And if your spotter dies or leaves the party, then you can change to a new willing spotter with 3 days of downtime or training. And the archetype is cool. If one of the duo hits with a ranged attack, the other does extra damage. Another feat says that if the spotter crits, you get to make a free ranged attack, that sort of thing. You can also pull off crazy stunts, like maybe shooting at your spotter, and then they redirect the shot off of themselves to hit an enemy that you can't see or something. Crazy silly stuff. Really, the big downside of this archetype is that both you and your spotter need to be regularly making ranged weapon attacks. Yeah, Sniping Duo works specifically with ranged strikes, not spell attacks. Hey, Editor Cyprime here. I realized I was mistaken about this. Your spotter does not need to be making ranged weapon attacks, but they still must be making strikes of some kind, and pulling off that level of coordination can just be really problematic. So what are my thoughts on this one? Well, if you find yourself in the position where, say, you are an archery ranger and maybe your friend is a Starlit Span Magus or something, then go for it. It seems like it could be a great damage booster onto a ranged build, and 2 people benefit for 1 person taking the feats. I just don't think that precise situation is going to come up in all too many groups. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Iridian Choirmaster here. I've talked about this archetype before. It came out in Battlecry, but it's kind of like Sniping Duo, only it works with melee or ranged attacks. Now, the feats and benefits are different, but it has the same idea. 1 guy takes the archetype, 2 people benefit. And the final one I'm going to talk about today is Aldori Duelist. This one was suggested by a few people. Now, the Aldori Duelist archetype has been around for a while, but recently, as of the posting of this video, it got a remaster in Battlecry, making it more accessible and giving it new feats. Aldori Duelists are people who go to a special school to learn how to use a special fencing blade, which is supposed to be like a fencing saber, I think. In game terms, it's basically a longsword with a finesse trait, which makes it, I think, the only one-handed finesse D8 weapon in the game. The downside is that it is an advanced weapon, so not many people are proficient in it. This new version of the archetype, though, fixes that. When you take the archetype, you gain access to Aldori dueling swords. FYI, they are uncommon weapons, so you can't normally buy them. Also, you treat those swords as martial weapons. This makes it easy for high-dexterity martial characters to use them. Instantly, I think of swashbucklers, thief rogues, and investigators benefiting from this archetype. Plus, the remaster version of this archetype has a bunch of new feats, like one-on-one, which lets you feint and attack as a single action. That is a fantastic feat for rogues, as it allows for sneak attacking without needing a friend to flank. Even some of the older feats have been made better. Aldori Parry used to require you to have a sword in one hand and nothing in the other, and it gave you a +2 bonus to AC. Now the feat gives the sword the parry trait, which is a +1 to AC, and if you just so happen not to have anything in the other hand, the bonus increases to +2. So you don't lose your entire bonus if you grab and drink a potion or hold on to a scroll for a round. There's a couple of minor downsides to this archetype, but they're a minor nitpicky kind of thing. Firstly, it's uncommon, so depending on your GM, access might be an issue. Secondly, the Aldori duelists and their schools are pretty intrinsically linked to Galarian, so if you aren't playing the default Pathfinder campaign setting, your GM may not have an Aldori dueling school to go to. It's not as easy to slot into any campaign as, say, a more generic Spirit Warrior. Finally, the archetype really only works with fencing-type characters. It's not going to help many spellcasters or monks or barbarians. It's really only good for martial characters that want to make use of their high dex. But hey, that's all for today. If you suggested an archetype I didn't use, I'm sorry. I tried to include the ones that I could easily figure out and explain, and that I didn't think the community had already explored. But did I miss your favorite archetype? If I did, remember to go check out my previous video on archetypes. But if your favorite isn't there either, then let me know in the comments below. If I get enough interest, maybe I'll do a third one of these. Hey, as a reminder, I have a Patreon. I'm going to try and post something fun there once a month, but honestly, it's just a way to help keep this channel financially viable. Just a few bucks a month, and I'm toying with the idea of adding a limited higher tier where you can request a specific video. Let me know what you think. And remember, I do have a Discord, link in the description to that as well. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That tells not only me, but also YouTube that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming!